do.
I do.
This won't end well.
You're giving too much of yourself, Clara. A life of giving more than she would ever receive.
Out of sympathy, she said yes. Not out of love, not out of passion, but out of a quiet sense of guilt she couldn't ignore. Everyone warned her. They're not equal, they said. This won't end well. She believed them. She walked into that marriage expecting sacrifice, a life of limitations, of giving more than she would ever receive. And her husband? A man the world had already judged, a man they pitied, dismissed, overlooked. But what no one saw, what no one could have imagined, was that behind the silence, behind the weakness everyone assumed, was a truth so powerful it would leave her questioning everything she thought she knew. Because the man she married out of pity was never who he seemed. And the moment she finds out the truth, her entire world changes forever.
If you believe stories should still teach wisdom in this generation, subscribe, like, share, and drop your thought on this story. Let's keep the conversation going, because these lessons are disappearing.
Her name was Clara, and in the town of Millhaven, a quiet, tight-knit community somewhere between the rolling fields of the countryside and the edge of something forgotten, Clara was known as the woman who never said no. Not to her neighbors, not to strangers, and certainly not to her own bleeding heart. She was 31 years old, dark-eyed, practical, steady, the kind of woman who kept extra bread in her cupboard for whoever might knock, who sat with the elderly widow across the road, not because anyone asked her to, but because someone had to. People admired Clara, but admiration, she'd learned long ago, does not keep you warm at night. She had never married. Not for lack of suitors, there had been a few, but because every man who had come into her life had eventually wanted something more from her than she was willing to give, without honesty. And Clara was, above all things, honest. She worked as a seamstress in the town's modest tailoring shop. She was good at it, patient, careful. She could see the potential in a ruined piece of cloth the way she could see the good in a ruined person. And that, perhaps, was her greatest strength. And her greatest weakness. It was on a Thursday morning, gray sky, the smell of coming rain, that Clara first saw the man named Thomas. He was sitting on the low stone wall outside the post office. His left leg was extended in front of him, wrapped in a worn leather brace that reached from his ankle to just below the knee. He walked with a cane, a simple, unvarnished wooden stick, and he moved with the careful deliberateness of someone who had learned through pain exactly how far he could push his body before it refused him. He was perhaps 35, maybe older, it was hard to say. His face had the kind of stillness to it that comes not from peace, but from practice. The face of a man who had trained himself not to react to the stares of strangers. And people stared. Clara noticed that immediately. Not cruelly, not with malice, but with that particular brand of pity that is almost worse than cruelty. The kind that says, "I am glad I am not you." Thomas noticed the stares too. He simply looked down at the letter in his hands and said nothing. Clara didn't approach him that day. She went about her errands, bought thread, picked up a parcel, stood in line at the bakery. But she thought about him that evening. There was something in the way he sat on that wall, not defeated, not bitter, just still, the way an old tree is still in a storm, rooted in itself, even as the wind moves everything around it. Clara asked Mrs. Alderton, her neighbor, the town's unofficial keeper of all knowledge, who the man with the cane was. Mrs. Alderton's expression changed in the way expressions do when the answer is longer than the question. "That's Thomas Webb," she said, setting down her tea. "Came to town about a year ago. Keeps to himself, lives in the old gardener's cottage at the edge of the Henley property. Does odd jobs, whatever his leg allows. Quiet man, good manners. Nobody really knows where he came from." She paused. "Poor soul," she added. And in those two words was everything the town had already decided about Thomas Webb. Clara said nothing, but she didn't forget him. The second time Clara saw Thomas was a third week later. He was at the market, struggling, not dramatically, not in a way that invited a scene, but quietly struggling to carry a box of vegetables while managing his cane on the uneven cobblestones. Clara walked over without thinking. "May I help with that?" He looked at her. His eyes were gray, calm, slightly surprised, not at the offer, but at the absence of performance in her voice. Most people who offered to help him spoke as though they were doing something noble. Clara spoke as though she was simply being practical. "Thank you," he said. They walked together to his cart. He didn't speak much, neither did she, but there was no awkwardness in the silence, the rare kind of quiet that exists between two people who are both comfortable in themselves. Before they parted, he said, "You're the seamstress, Clara." She raised an eyebrow. "You know me?" "Mrs. Alderton," he said simply. Clara almost smiled. "Of course." After that, they fell into the natural rhythm of a small town, a nod at the market, a word at the post office on Sunday mornings. Nothing more. But Clara found herself noticing things about Thomas Webb that the town seemed to have overlooked entirely. The way he read, always with a book under his arm, well-worn, the kind that had been read more than once. The way he spoke to children, directly, without the condescension most adults couldn't help, as though they were small people, not small problems. The way he fixed things, a neighbor's broken gate, the old woman's leaking gutter, not for payment, just because the thing needed doing and he was there and he could.
Nobody noticed. Or rather, people noticed, but they filed it away under "poor Thomas doing what he can," as if his limitations were the whole story, as if everything else about him was footnote. Clara noticed differently. It was Mrs. Alderton, of course it was Mrs. Alderton, who first planted the idea. They were having tea one afternoon when the older woman set down her cup with the careful deliberateness of someone about to say something they've been rehearsing. "Clara," she said, "you're not getting younger." Clara kept her eyes on her tea. "Thank you, Mrs. Alderton, I hadn't noticed. Don't be cheeky. You're 31. You live alone. You give everything to everyone and keep nothing for yourself. I'm fine. You are not fine. You are functional. There is a difference." She paused. "Thomas Webb is a good man." The silence that followed was very loud. "He is," Clara agreed carefully. "He is alone. You are alone. Mrs. Alderton, I'm not saying love," the older woman said, holding up her hand. "I'm saying life. Sometimes people build a life together not because of fireworks, but because they recognize something true in each other." Clara said nothing for a long time. "He would never ask," the older woman continued quietly. "A man like that, he's too proud to ask, too aware of how the world sees him. He would never reach across that distance first. That's not a reason to marry someone." "No," Alderton agreed, "but it might be a reason to begin." Clara thought about it for 2 weeks. She was honest with herself about her motivations, because Clara was always honest, even when it was uncomfortable. She wasn't in love with Thomas Webb. She respected him. She liked him. She felt a pull toward him that she couldn't fully name, something between recognition and concern. And yes, if she was completely honest, there was pity. Not the ugly, condescending kind, but the human kind. The kind that looks at someone's hardship and says, "That is unfair. That person deserves more than they've been given." She wasn't proud of that, but she didn't lie about it either. She went to see him on a Tuesday evening. The gardener's cottage was small but clean, neatly kept. A row of books on a plank shelf, a single lamp, a modest table, tools arranged with the precision of someone who had learned to make every movement count. He opened the door and looked at her for a moment without speaking. "Clara, Thomas, may I come in?" He stepped aside. She sat. He sat across from her, and Clara, who had rehearsed this conversation 7 different ways, abandoned the rehearsal entirely and said exactly what she meant. "I want to propose something to you, not out of charity. I want to be clear about that from the beginning. But I think you are a good man, and I think I could be a good companion, and I think we are both tired of being alone. So I am asking, directly and honestly, if you would consider a life with me." The silence stretched long enough that she began to regret her directness. Then Thomas said, "You know what people will say." "I know," Clara said. "They'll say you married a cripple out of pity. They'll say it to your face." "They might. Does that not bother you?"
Clara looked at him steadily. "Thomas, I have been the subject of town gossip since I was 19 years old and refused a merchant's son because he lied about his character. I have made my peace with what people say." Something shifted in his face, not a smile exactly, more like the releasing of a long-held tension. "You are an unusual woman," he said quietly. "So I've been told." Another pause. "I need you to know something," Thomas said. His voice was careful now, deliberate in the way of someone choosing words like a surgeon chooses instruments. "There will come a day when you learn things about me, and on that day I need you to remember that I never deceived you about what matters most, my character, my intentions." Clara looked at him for a long time. "That's a strange thing to say." "Yes," he agreed, "but honest. I try to be." A beat. "Then, yes," he said. "I'll consider it, and I think, yes."
They were married 6 weeks later. Small ceremony. Mrs. Alderton, a few of Clara's closer neighbors, a minister who asked no unnecessary questions. Thomas wore a simple dark jacket. Clara wore blue, not white, because she said white was for pretending, and she had never been good at pretending. The town talked, as predicted. "She's sacrificing herself," said one woman at the butcher's. "Clara always had to be the helper," said another, shaking her head as though a good quality were a disorder. "Poor dear," said a third, and there were those 2 words again, aimed now not at Thomas, but at Clara. The pity, like water, had simply found a new container. Clara heard it all. She said nothing. She went home and made dinner. The first months were not difficult in the ways Clara had imagined. She had expected to carry the weight of the household alone. She had expected limitations, both practical and emotional, that would require her to sacrifice quietly and regularly. What she found instead surprised her. Thomas was a meticulous man, an organized man, a man who, despite the physical restrictions of his leg, had built a life of extraordinary internal order. He managed their finances with a precision that made Clara, who had always been somewhat haphazard with her accounts, quietly relieved. He cooked on the days her work ran long, not elaborate meals, but good, careful food, seasoned with the kind of attention that said, "This matters, you matter." He listened. That, perhaps more than anything else, was what Clara had not expected. Most people she knew listened in order to respond. Thomas listened in order to understand. There was a difference. You could feel it in the quality of the silence after you spoke, the sense that your words had actually been received, turned over, considered. Clara, who had spent years being the listener for everyone else, found it disorienting at first, then extraordinary. Then, quietly, she began to love him. Not dramatically, not with the rush and flame of romance stories, but the way you come to love a place where you are safe. But there were things that confused her. Small things at first. The letters that arrived addressed to a name she didn't recognize, T.A. Whittemore, that Thomas would tuck away without comment. The phone calls he took outside, voice low, always ending with, "I'll handle it, not yet." The visitor who came once, a young man in an expensive coat who stood at their door with the stiff formality of someone accustomed to conducting business, not paying visits. Thomas spoke with him on the doorstep for 20 minutes, then came inside with a face that had returned to its practiced stillness. "Who was that?" asked Clara. "An old associate. He won't come again." Clara waited. He didn't elaborate. She let it go. But she didn't forget. Then came the day at the bank. Clara had gone to arrange a small loan. Her tailoring shop needed a new industrial machine, and the cost was more than she had saved. The bank manager, a round-faced man named Gerald, who had known Clara for a decade, looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Mrs. Webb," he said carefully, "I think there may be some confusion about your financial situation. I just need a small loan. Mrs. Webb," he folded his hands, "your husband settled a very substantial sum into a joint account on the week of your marriage. I assumed you knew." Clara was very still. "How substantial?" Gerald told her. The number didn't make sense for a moment, the way certain numbers are too large for the part of the brain that handles ordinary life. Then it made sense, and that was worse.
She drove home slowly. Thomas was in the garden, or what passed for their garden, trimming the hedge with his careful, unhurried movements. "Thomas," she said. He turned. She watched his face, watched it do something she had rarely seen it do, something that looked for just a moment like the look of a man bracing for a consequence he long knew was coming. "Clara," said slowly, "I think you have something to tell me." He told her to sit down. She sat. He set aside the hedge clippers. He lowered himself into the garden chair across from her with the careful deliberateness she had come to know so well. He laced his fingers together and looked at her. And then, for the first time since she had known him, Thomas Webb told the truth in full. His real name was Thomas Aldrich Whittemore. He was the only son of Edmund Whittemore, founder of Whittemore Holdings, one of the largest privately held property and development companies in the country, a name that appeared in financial newspapers, a name that meant something in boardrooms Clara had never set foot in. Edmund Whittemore had died 4 years ago, and Thomas, the only heir, had inherited everything. Clara sat with this for a long moment. "Then why?" she started. "Let me finish," he said quietly. She waited.
The leg, he told her, was real. An accident, a climbing accident when he was 26, had damaged the bone and the nerves in ways that surgery had only partially repaired. The brace was real. The cane was real. The pain on bad mornings was real. But when his father died and the inheritance transferred to him, a fortune so large it had its own legal department, Thomas had done something that his father's attorneys, his cousins, his father's board of directors, and the entire social machinery around him had considered either eccentric or insane. He walked away. Not permanently, but deliberately. "My father," Thomas said, "was a man who never knew, not once in his life, whether the people around him were there for him or for his money. He died surrounded by people. He was the loneliest man I ever knew." He paused. "When he died, I was already dealing with the accident, with learning to live in a different body than the one I'd planned on, with the way people's faces changed when they saw the cane." He looked at his hands, and I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, nobody was performing for me. Nobody was trying to impress me. Nobody was adjusting themselves to be what they thought I wanted, because nobody knew what I had. Clara said nothing. "I made a decision. I would live a year, just 1 year, as the man the world saw when they looked at the cane. Not as Thomas Whittemore, heir, as Thomas Webb, the man on the wall outside the post office. And I would learn what my father once told me, that the best inheritance a man can leave his son is not money, but the ability to read another man's character." "And could you?" Clara asked. Her voice was very quiet. "Read character?" "I learned a great deal about what pity looks like from the inside, about how people speak to you when they've decided you have nothing of value to offer, about which people look past the cane and which people stop at it." He paused. "You were the only person in Millhaven who ever spoke to me as though the cane was simply a feature of my life, not the defining fact of my existence." Clara looked away. Her throat felt tight. "And when you came to my door and proposed to me with that extraordinary directness, not pretending it was love, not performing sacrifice, I thought, here is an honest woman, maybe the most honest person I have met in 20 years. "You should have told me," Clara said. "Yes," he said simply, "I should have. I kept meaning to find the right moment, and then the longer I waited, the more I feared what you would think, not of the wealth, but of the deception." He looked at her steadily. "I told you that first night that there were things I hadn't told the town, that there would come a day when you would learn them. I told you I had never deceived you about what matters most." Clara was quiet for a very long time. "You could have told me before the wedding." "I could have. I was a coward about that." "Why?" The answer took him a moment. "Because by then I already knew that I wanted to marry you, not as a test, not as part of some plan, but because you were exactly the kind of person I had spent 3 years hoping still existed."
he exhaled slowly. "And I was afraid that if you knew the money, you would never know whether you had chosen me or the life I came with." The silence that followed was very long, and in that silence, Clara did something she rarely did. She cried. Not with grief, not with anger, with the particular exhausting relief of realizing that a thing you feared was not the thing you thought it was. There is a thing that happens in the human heart when a great truth is revealed. It does not settle immediately. It moves through us in stages, first shock, then confusion, and the slow, careful work of reassembling everything we thought we knew into a new shape that can hold the new information. Clara spent 3 days doing that work. She did not leave. She did not rage. She was not performatively forgiving. She simply went about her days, work, meals, the ordinary motions of a life, and thought.
On the 4th morning, she came downstairs to find Thomas already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his hands around a mug of tea, not reading, not working,
just waiting. "I have questions," she said. "I know," he said. "Ask them." And she did them, all of them, for 2 hours. About the company, about the lawyers, about the cousins who expected to inherit, about the men who came to the door, about what the year in Millhaven had cost him, practically, professionally, emotionally, about what he intended now. Thomas answered every question, without flinching and without deflection. By the time they finished, the tea was cold and the morning had gone. "Do you plan to go back to it? The company? The life?" He thought about it for a moment. "Not the way it was before, but there are responsibilities I've been managing at a distance that I can no longer defer. People whose livelihoods depend on decisions I've been putting off. I can't stay hidden indefinitely. I was never planning to stay hidden forever. What does that mean for us?" He looked at her for a moment.
"That is the question I most need you to answer," he said, "because this isn't my life to arrange anymore. It's ours. And I am asking you, honestly, directly, in the way you deserve, what you want." Clara sat with that. "I didn't marry you for your money," she said finally. "I know. I married you because I thought you were a good man. I know that too. And you are a good man." She said it plainly, "but you also kept a very large truth from me, and I have to decide what to do with that." "Yes," he said, "you do." Another long silence. "I am angry," she said. "You have every right to be." "And I am, against my better judgment." She looked at him with the peculiar expression of someone who's been surprised by their own heart. Something moved across Thomas Webb's face. The practiced stillness finally, quietly, broke, and what was underneath it was not the face of a wealthy man, was not the face of a man who had won. It was the face of a man who had been profoundly, unexpectedly relieved. "Clara," he said. "Don't," she said, but gently. "Don't make it a speech. Just be honest with me from here, whatever comes. Just be honest." "Always," he said. And she believed him. Not because it was romantic, but because she had watched this man for months, had seen his character in the ordinary, unobserved moments that are the only reliable evidence we ever have of who a person truly is. The cane had been a disguise, but his hands, fixing the widow's gate, setting the table, turning the pages of worn books, those had been entirely, irreversibly real. What happened next did not happen quickly. It happened the way true things happen, gradually, visibly, with the quiet inevitability of a tide coming in. Thomas, Whitmore, began to let his real life back in. Lawyers came, accountants, colleagues. The young man in the expensive coat returned, this time invited, this time meeting Clara properly and shaking her hand with the careful deference of someone who's been briefed. The cottage was too small for meetings. They found a proper house, still in Millhaven, because Clara had her shop, and because Thomas said simply that he liked it there, that it had given him something he had not expected, a memory of what ordinary life felt like, and a preference for maintaining some of it. Millhaven watched. Millhaven revised its opinion. The woman who had pitied Thomas Webb was now the woman who had, somehow, impossibly, married Thomas Whitmore. And the town, with the efficiency of small places, rewrote the entire story in retrospect. Clara always had good instincts, said the woman from the butcher's. I agreed, said the woman who had called her poor dear. Mrs. Alderton, to her credit, said nothing smug. She simply had tea with Clara on a Thursday afternoon and waited. I suppose you'll be moving, she said eventually. Eventually, Clara said, but not yet. And are you happy? Clara considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I am still adjusting, she said honestly, to the scale of it, to what it means, to the fact that the man I thought I understood is also a man I am still learning. That's marriage, Mrs. Alderton said simply. Yes, Clara agreed. I suppose it is. But the real test, the one that would reveal the most about Clara's character, not Thomas's, came later. It came from a woman named Diane. Diane was a cousin of Thomas's, slim, well-dressed, with the permanently brittle expression of someone who has spent years preparing for a disappointment they were determined not to show. She arrived unannounced one afternoon, when Thomas was in the city for a board meeting. She sat across from Clara in their sitting room with a cup of tea she didn't drink. I'll be direct, Diane said. Please, said Clara. You know that Thomas has never been close to this family. You know that his father's estate was expected, by everyone who had any reasonable claim to it, to be distributed more broadly upon his death. She set down the untouched tea. What you may not know, Diane continued, is that there are legal avenues available to the family, and that his marriage, rushed to an outsider during a period when his judgment could reasonably be questioned, opens certain doors. The room was very quiet. Clara looked at Diane for a long moment. Are you threatening me, she said slowly, or threatening him? I'm explaining the situation. No, Clara said. You're testing me. You want to see whether I'll be frightened enough or greedy enough to act against my husband's interests to protect my own. Diane's expression didn't change. And, she said, and I won't, Clara said simply. Not because I'm afraid of him, but because it would be wrong. Thomas Whitmore, is my husband. He made a mistake in not telling me the full truth sooner, and we are working through that between us. That is none of your business, and his estate is none of yours. You could walk away with quite a settlement. I didn't marry him for a settlement. You married him out of pity, Diane said, and it landed like a deliberate stone. Everyone knows that. Clara was still for a moment. Then she said, yes, that was the beginning. Pity and respect and a kind of recognition I couldn't name at the time. She looked at Diane steadily. But I stayed because he is a good man, and I will go on staying because of that same reason. Not his money, not his name, his character. How very admirable, Diane said, with the tone of someone for whom admiration is the highest form of condescension. I don't need it to be admirable. I just need it to be true. Diane left without finishing her tea. Clara sat for a while in the empty room. Then she picked up the phone and called Thomas, not to report the visit, not to alarm him, simply because she wanted to hear his voice, and because she had realized, sitting across from a woman who had just offered her a way out, that she did not want a way out. She wanted what she had, complicated, surprising, still unfolding, but hers. There is an old saying. You will find a version of it in one form or another across many cultures, many traditions, many languages. Do not judge a river by the stone you throw into it. What the saying means is this: what a thing appears to be from the outside, the surface ripple, the quick reaction, tell you almost nothing about the depths. Thomas Webb was, to the world, a disabled man, a limited man, a man to be pitied. But pity, real pity, honest pity, the kind that does not perform itself, is not always a small thing. Sometimes pity is simply the beginning of seeing. Clara saw a man sitting on a wall. She saw something quiet and true and overlooked. She walked toward it.
That is not weakness. That is not foolishness. That is, in the oldest, most essential tradition of every story ever told in every language under every sky, courage. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the daily kind, the kind that says, I will see this person clearly, even when the world has already looked away. Clara and Thomas eventually moved, not far, but to a house with proper space for a life that had expanded beyond the gardener's cottage. She kept her shop. She expanded it slowly, employing 2 other women from the town. The leg never fully healed. Thomas still used the cane. He stopped minding the stairs. Not because they stopped, but because he had learned in a year of being seen as nothing what it felt like to be seen as something. And he carried that knowledge carefully, the way you carry water in a bowl, grateful and careful not to spill it. They had a daughter eventually. They named her Ruth, because Ruth, Thomas said, was the name of a woman in an old story who chose loyalty over comfort, love over logic, and walked into an uncertain future beside someone the world said was not worth walking beside. Clara had looked at him for a long moment. "You've always been a reader," she said. "One of my better qualities," he agreed. And she smiled, not politely, not graciously, not charitably, but the way a woman smiles when she is, against expectation, genuinely content. The world has many ways of measuring a person, by what they own, by what they can do, by how they appear at first glance. But there is only one measurement that holds across every test life gives us, and that is character. What a person chooses when no one is watching, what they protect when it would be easier to let go, what they walk toward when the world is walking away. Clara didn't marry Thomas Whitmore. She married Thomas Webb, the man the world had dismissed. And that man, that quiet, steady, overlooked man, was exactly who he appeared to be. The wealth was a surprise, but the character was never hidden. It was always there, sitting on a wall, carrying books, fixing broken things, waiting for someone who knew how to look. And if this story has taught us anything, it is this. Be careful who you pity, and be more careful who you overlook, because the man the world has already judged may be the very one the world most needed to see.